Good evening and welcome to Special Cru episode 4. I'm Gav and Stu from the Grid Irn-Cru, the NFL podcast made in Scotland by NFL lovers. This is Special Cru. This is the show where we get to talk with various different members from in and around the game worldwide and getting to know their stories and getting to know a bit more about them. Joining me this evening from the crew, I have Stu, joining us from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada tonight. Stu, how are you?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. I'm looking forward to getting into a discussion about all things kicking and punting here with our lovely guests.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And Stu, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head in terms of the theme for this evening. So we have three gentlemen who have lots of experience, very much putting the foot into American football. First of all, we have Martin, also known as the British punter. Martin, how are you this evening?
Oh, very well. Thank you, Gav. And thanks for having me on. Let's talk about kicking.
Looking forward to it. Thanks very much, Martin. Next up, we have Robert Grant, or as we will be calling him this evening, Bobby G. Mr. G, how are you?
Doing really good. Thanks, guys. Brilliant to be with you tonight. I'm really excited for this. This is going to be fun.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Bobby. And finally, we have a man who some of you may have heard of. He is the legendary barefoot kicker himself, Mr. Rob Hart. Rob, how are you this evening?
Gav, I'm fine, thanks, buddy. Good to join an amazing crew here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. And I guess one of the things I think I want to say is this is episode 4 that we're recording. However, I think there is actually some apologies due to both Rob and Martin. We have been trying to get this in the diary since the end of July, and actually this is very much on myself and Dan in terms of the scheduling. There's been a number of things going on, so we are really glad to have everyone here tonight. However, serendipity has allowed us to not only get one, but 2 former members of the Scottish Claymores set up. Rob Grant joining us very much as a late addition, and we are more than glad to have a trio of kickers here tonight to get us underway. As we do on every episode of Special Cru, we really just want to, I guess, do some introductions first of all. So, as I mentioned, we tried to set this up as one of our first interviews. Martin, you'd very well, I guess, thoroughly and professionally catalogued the career of Rob during the summer in one of your own YouTube documentaries. So I think it'd be great just to start with yourself and I guess tell us about yourself and your background. How did you get into the game?
So growing up, I was always a goalkeeper and played county level and quite a high level in Oxfordshire where I grew up. And I always thought that was going to be my path, like just being a goalkeeper, essentially. And then one night, it must have been a Sunday, I was flicking through, I think Sky Sports only had 3 channels back then. And I'm flicking through and there was an NFL game on. And I'd kind of seen bits in passing. I knew what the game was, but I didn't know anything about it. And I just got hooked. I watched it. I thought, this is really cool. This was about 2000. And later that year, me and my brother got a PS2 back in the day. And I brought Madden 2001, which had just come out on the PS2. And then that's how I kind of learned the rules. And then I saw all the NFL Europe teams at the back, because obviously I had no idea what NFL Europe was at the time. And then just went from there, and then started supporting the Cardinals. Less said about that, probably the better, but someone needs to support them. And got into, obviously, the Claymores. That would have been the Clint Sterner season, I think it was, 2001.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
And in 2002, it was the Scott Dreisbach, Gene Dahlquist era, I think. That's when I went up and, saw the Claymores play Ryan Fire at Hampden Park. Met
Yeah.
Rob afterwards. I've got a photo somewhere of like 9 stone me in a baggy Claymores shirt with Rob stood just off the side of me. But I don't know where that photo is. But and then so I went from kind of just watching it, and then I played for the London Olympians under 19s, and then I played for England, and I was involved in the kind of GB setup. I never actually played for GB, but I did play for England. And yeah, that was kind of my introduction. So it's quite quick, really, if I'm being honest. From not really knowing much about it, I just found out about it and got obsessed with it, essentially, and not looked back since. So,
and I think that's super. I guess that's really interesting to hear that perspective, because the things that you've gone on to do, I can't personally measure up to that. I think I played maybe 2 games of college ball before I learned that I really can't take a tackle as someone that didn't come to the sport till I was about 18. But in terms of actually these 2 points, I mean, it sounds cheesy in some ways, but actually, Madden, I think for the Sega Mega Drive was perhaps one of the first things that I, came across, and, throwing down and outs repeatedly to Jerry Rice and beating up on the Cowboys, which is something that as a Giants fan we're seeing less of at the moment. But there's probably a few teams that I could switch to, actually, if I wanted to see more of that. But yeah, I think you root in both, obviously with the games, but more crucially kind of links us to other guesses, the Claymores. So I've been following, I guess, since the very beginning, although I didn't go to my first game since 1996. And then I think 2001, that was the first year that I actually got a season ticket. The team made that formal move to Glasgow, where I'm based, and became much more accessible for me. And it's almost like that was a big kind of jumping off point for me in terms of my own fandom of the game. Maybe just want to bring you in, I guess, from a similar perspective. The Claymores, I guess, a big part of your introduction to the sport.
Oh, massively, yeah. And obviously back then it was the only British professional team, and the fact that it was a Scottish team never bothered me. I was just like wanted to get behind the British team, and yeah, it was really good times. I look back fondly. I used to watch all the games kind of April time onwards, because there was just nothing else on then either. And when you're new to a sport and there's not many leagues, and you only had 3 channels on Sky, occasionally a game on Channel 5 at silly o'clock in the morning on a Monday, it was Sunday afternoon, the best European players kind of giving it a go, and I just loved that element.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, as I'd mentioned there, Stu, you'd said that previously that similar ages, similar background, that the Claymores are a big part of your introduction into American football fandom.
Yeah, I mean, that's like I started kind of following the Claymores, obviously, back when I was still kind of in high school, and then probably I was similar to you. Like I started going to games full time when they made that move into Glasgow, and Martin, we probably could have met at that Right Fire game for all you know, because I definitely would have been at that.
Yeah.
So all of them back then. So yeah, they were a big part of my life, or in terms of my football life and loving it. Because from the soccer world, as listeners of the pod know, I'm a Kilmarnock fan. So as much as we were pretty decent back then, we were kind of in the Ali McCoist glory years, as it were. We were still usually kind of out of the running by that kind of April time. So I was definitely looking for something I could bite into and have a team that I could support and watch what was the best in Europe at that time, kind of thing, doing their thing as well. But yeah, the Claymores were definitely part of my gateway into then support, getting more into the NFL as I eventually left and becoming a Bengals fan for my sins.
And I think that's kind of leads us nicely on. So we have a trio of kickers, but we also have a trio of football fans that came in through the Claymores. We're perfectly timed. We have 2 people part of the Scottish Claymores setup joining us this evening. First of all, Bobby G, maybe just want to come to you and just, I guess, tell us a bit about your background and how you really got into this sport.
Well, I'm sitting back and enjoying, like, all these memories keep flooding back, and I don't know if you see Rob and I, but we're just smiling because, like, these things just bring back so many memories. And I was young. I was the youngest guy on the team, and kind of Rob did kind of take me under his wing. But I remember fondly just the experiences that we had, and I still believe we had the best fans in the world, because it was a special time. But I was going to say I kind of lucked out and ended up at the Claymores, but I don't really believe in luck. I think you work hard and you make choices and things happen, But I'd always loved American football since I was a little kid. I loved the 49ers. I loved Steve Young. He was a hero of mine, and now he's a friend of mine, which is kind of pretty cool, But I loved the game of football, and my first poster on my wall was an American football, and I remember loving it. But I grew up playing soccer, football. I was a goalkeeper too. I signed with Celtic Boys Club when I was 14 years old, and I was the next Pat Bonner in my mind. That's the path I was going. But I had this really cool opportunity to go to America and go to high school in California. And it was there I thought, man, this is a cool game. I was a little bit crazy kid from Livingston that could do things on the football field that you'd get into trouble for on the streets, And so I ended up playing, and I went to high school and had the opportunity to play football, and I was playing middle linebacker and tight end. And the coach is like, "Hey, Scottish guy, can you kick?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." Line the ball up there, and he puts it on like the 40-yard line, and I go up and kick it, and it goes about 70 yards through the uprights, and everybody just kind of looks at each other, and that was the start of me and falling in love with that process, and I had a really cool experience playing in high school, and when my hope was to go through high school and then go on to college and things, but I kind of took a little bit of a detour with things. We had some family things. I had to come back.
Yeah.
And, here's me thinking all bravado. I played 1 year of high school football, and I called the Scottish Claymores office one day when I came back, and Mike Kenny, who was the national coach at the time, answered the phone, and I think it was like a Thursday, and he asked me what I was doing at the weekend. And anyway, he came and picked me up on the Sunday, and we went to this little soccer field, football pitch up in Winchborough, and I punted, and I kicked off, and I kicked field goals. And then a week later, I got a letter, and I'd been selected, or he put me forward to play for the European All-Star team at the Super Bowl in New Orleans with EFAF. And that was kind of the start for me. And it was just as kind of Martin said, the whirlwind of football just kind of took off for me. And it was such a neat thing, to have the opportunity to do that, to go to Germany for 10 days, all the training, then go to New Orleans and go to the Super Bowl, and play there and have that experience. And I just fell in love with it. And, and then I just started that pathway as a national player into the Claymores, and had a good few years experience and learned from the best. And then my life just took a different path. And I'm very grateful for it,
That's superb. It's really excellent to hear. And I guess just circling back to just ever so slightly for a moment, because you mentioned obviously you're part of the Celtic Boys setup. So I guess for some of our international listeners, crazy it might sound for a couple of Scottish hosts here, but Celtic, one of, if not the biggest team in Scotland.
The biggest team in Scotland.
Look from here and there.
But obviously, I mean, that is a big deal to be in there. And if I recall correctly from some of my reading, you did have the opportunity to, I think, to go on and play with Hibs as well. Is that?
That's correct. Yeah. So I was a decent goalkeeper. I had opportunities. I was at Hibs. I trained with some other senior clubs, and I got this opportunity, and it was an opportunity that I made myself, and then people helped me on the way. You know, I met this really cool family from California, and their son and I became pen pals, and I wrote a letter saying, man, it'd be so cool to come and go to high school over there with you guys. His mum contacted my mum, and the rest is history. I left high school and worked all summer and saved up money, and I still look back. My older brother still kind of shakes his head sometimes, and because I was a decent goalkeeper, and maybe I had a chance, maybe I didn't, you know, but I made a choice, and I have no regrets whatsoever. That opportunity that I got to go to America absolutely changed the trajectory of my life and the things I've been able to do. And sometimes I pinch myself. You know, I've had some really cool experiences and had my life blessed by so many great people that, you know, it's not, I could drop names and you guys would be like, holy smokes, holy smokes, holy smokes. All these people I've had the opportunity to be around that have taught me and coached me and teached me about life through the game of football. And, you know, and none more so than our head coach when we were at the Claymores, Jim Kreiner, you know, such a special guy. And it's been he's been an integral part of my life all the way up to today. But yeah, it was a really cool. As I look back, it's almost like a lifetime ago, but I made a choice, and it's something that really, really kind of impacted my life for good.
No, that's superb. And I think, you know, one our previous guest who we interviewed just yesterday, Phoebe Schechter, who everyone will know from Sky Sports, of course. Yep. But her journey into the world of football, you know, came reasonably late in life. She was in her 20s by the time she actually considered anything to do with football. But what I'm kind of hearing is a very similar theme from her to yourself. Is actually it's about, well, when you get these opportunities, you take advantage of them, and if you say yes and you commit to it, the world is still your oyster. Yeah. So Phoebe's a good friend of mine, and we've spoke about that too. You know, it's very uncommon. Not now, but it was very uncommon for a woman to be involved in the sport, and she got an opportunity. She made an opportunity, and she took it, and it's been really fun to watch her rise in the sport and the impact she's having, and she's a remarkable lady that's going to do remarkable things, not just for women in the sport or girls in the sport, but for the sport. Yes, you know, really, 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 and you know, it's loving the game of football. It's more than just touchdowns. It's more than just throwing a ball. It's more. This sport is such a cool thing for people. It teaches you more about yourself than anything else. The hard work, the commitment, the determination, all these different things that for young people, you have to be fully committed in the sport to get the best out of it. But she does a great job, and it's fun to see her on TV, you know. But it's a really cool thing, and we spoke about it, and she made cool opportunities for herself and took them and took a chance on herself. 100%, absolutely, and I think you know that's really what we're all really keen to talk about and promote this game as a whole, because the NFL, you know, certainly as a business, is doing phenomenally well. I think we know that there's plenty more that we can do, particularly in this country, but even, you know, across the world, in Europe and Australia and Japan, you know, in terms of growing this sport and getting more people involved. That there's so much more that we can do, and having people out there who can champion the sport. Obviously, Phoebe doing that on a much bigger scale to ourselves, but anything we can do to help grow the game as individuals, you know, I think we all need to be on board for that. And thanks, Rob, for giving us that awesome introduction to yourself. I think that leads us on to our third and final guest, who kind of brings this all together. So we have Mr. Rob Hart, who obviously the subject of Martin's documentary and a good personal friend of Bobby G's. So Rob, of course, I think most people will know you as someone who spent 7 years playing professionally, first of all with the England Monarchs, And then, of course, for myself and Stu in particular, 6 years with the Scottish Claymores. I think it would be remiss of us not to mention the fact that you actually did go to training camp with a few NFL teams as well. So, yeah, certainly a big history of playing the sport professionally. But taking a step back from that, yeah, obviously Martin has gone through this in great detail, but for the benefit of all of our listeners, can you maybe tell us how you came to be in this game?
Well, I made a note actually, Martin. You had 3 channels, sports channels when you were growing. We had 4 channels. That was it. You just watched 4 channels, and one of those channels had American football on in the 80s. You watched Mick Luckhurst, and you watched The Fridge, and you watched the Redskins against the Bears, and all of that. And the glamour in the 80s of American football was what got me into it. My brother started watching it and said that I should watch it, so I did. Well, there was nothing else to watch on TV on a Sunday night, and if you wanted to get the results, you know, if they weren't on TV, you had to wait for First Down on a Thursday to come out, and you waited for the newspaper, and you kind of try to find places that actually had First Down. So the magazine would give you an update of what was going on, which was a legendary magazine, you know, for me in the 80s and 90s. And I played the same journey, basically. So I played soccer, and at a reasonable level. It wasn't particularly good. And then all my mates started playing American football. And so I wanted to join in with my mates and just started playing American football. And like Bobby, I tried other positions, but being a short, physically unable individual, I could kick the ball. I could kick the ball particularly well, and it was obvious that I could kick the ball well. So I practiced, and then you take those opportunities that are given to you. I mean, people that I worked with, you know, at even at the lowest, I say the lowest level, at the grassroots level, they recognise and they support you and they champion you. And you move to the next level and you try and take those opportunities. And, you know, whether you're playing for England or, you know, whether you're playing for Scotland and California or whatever, you just try your best and keep on working hard and take all those opportunities. And hopefully it takes you somewhere, which is where it took me, really.
Yeah, that's superb, Robin. And I think, obviously, you really did go through that journey. So you actually, played the sport in college. You went to Murray State for several reasons. I think you were recently inducted into their Hall of Fame.
Yep, in 2009. That was the most unbelievable experience, because from playing football at University of Sheffield Zulus, which is what they were called at the time, to then going to university at Murray State, playing on a on a park in Leeds with burnt out cars, and then going to play in front of 20,000 people at Murray State. You know, it's a bit of a different. And so as you guys, you know, as you go that vertical journey, it was a very quick transition from going from a grassroots level in this country to college in the States. And I did really well. I again took opportunities. I was lucky to be given those opportunities, and then just did my best and worked hard. You know, you practice every day, you kick every day, and you work on your technique, and you refine it, and you work with people. And if an opportunity comes, you take it. Look, I got inducted into the Hall of Fame because I was basically part of the best team in Murray State history. It was very little to do with me, okay? It was to do with the people that were around me, and they gave me an opportunity to make those kicks. And I think that every kicker, sometimes you go into a season. When I played for the Monarchs for the first year, I had 3 kicks the entire season. That was it, 3 field goals. Whereas at Murray State, I had 28 in one season, and that's a lot at college level. So, but you still got to kick them, you know. So you've got to take those opportunities. So I was very fortunate to be in a really good team.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really humble of you. I think it brings upon an important point, because, of course, I mean, some would say that kickers don't always get the recognition that they deserve unless they either win the game or, in some cases, miss a crucial kick. But there's also other people who are a part of that journey that can be just as important. So we've seen, I think both myself and Stu as Giants and Bengals fans, we've had very recent special teams woes as recently for myself on the Giants side in the Sunday night game. But Stu, of course, you had the Ravens game in overtime where I think we had a backup holder came in.
Yeah, I wasn't so much a backup holder then. That's the Rekow, who's he's our punter, and we finally have a good punter. So, Martin, we can maybe talk punting in a second.
He's a BYU guy. Yep.
Yeah, and he's like some leg on him, and he's extremely accurate as well, because it's like we've got a guy that can boom like 55, 60-yard punts and drop it, so it's not just bouncing into the end zone or out the back kind of thing. So, but yeah, that was one of those where I guess I was actually going to ask about that, Gav, was, like how, I guess who is, or in terms of like the symbiosis between that, your snapper and your holder and your kicker, like who was your favorite person you worked with for holding and all that, and like, and who did you work with for the longest, and how many reps does it take to get that chemistry? Because it's such a system, or there has to be so much fluidity to it.
Well, it was different for different teams. So for NFL Europe, you were always using somebody who it wasn't their main job. So in NFL Europe, you turn up to pre-season and you'd just be hoping to God there was someone that actually had the ability to do it. At college, there was somebody that was on a scholarship to throw the ball between their legs. And my college long snapper was a guy called Wes Shoemate, and he was awesome. And he's a really good friend of mine, still keep in contact, and he was awesome. He was on the money all the time. And then as a holder goes, normally the punters are pretty good holders anyway, because it's expected as a job. Look, Stu, you just practice every single day and you just put the reps in every single day. And it's pretty obvious who's going to be your starter, but then you have to make sure that you've got the backups as well, because if you've got a lineman who's starting left guard and he's just starting long snapper, you can bet full well that he's probably going to go down at some point during the season. So you need to have backups as well. But Bobby, have you got anything to add to that? I mean, you're the coach, so I mean, you coach special teams as well, but I mean, it's just practice, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's the kicker really is only as good as the hold. The holder's only as good as the snap, because it's got to be one fluid motion. Snap, hold, kick, snap, hold, kick. And it should just look so mechanical. But you want to get off in 1.5 seconds max, 1.3 seconds. Yeah, and it is. I'm sorry?
I would say 1.2, 1.3 was always what we aimed for.
Yeah. And that's it. So, if you can get a guy that can snap the ball, he's worth his every penny, And as you said, a lot of punters now, they're very athletic as well, so that they do it. That's part of their responsibility to hold. But it's just repetition. And when I was coaching in high school or college or wherever it is, your early outs, your specialists are out first. They're out pre-practice, before practice starts, and they're getting reps and reps and reps and reps. And those are the guys that they spend all the time together, because you do have to have a chemistry with those guys, because there has to be, if you don't have trust, then what do you have? The kicker can't be looking down, waiting for the ball to go there. He's got to trust it. It's got to be there. And, his most important foot is his plant foot. He's got to trust that the ball's going to be in the spot that he's put down. And the holder's got to trust that he's, as he gets the ball, he doesn't have to reach for it. All he's doing is redirecting it right to his spot. But it's fun. It's fun. I mean, and as you said, like in NFL Europe, every year we had a different long snapper. Kevin Drake 1 year.
Bob, you asked Martin. You asked Martin how kicking in Britain is in comparison to how it looks in the States with regards to the fluidity. Martin, how's the fluidity of a kicking unit within the British game?
Non-existent, really.
It's hard, isn't it?
It's roulette every time you step up for either a field goal or a punt. It could go anywhere. I've had to adapt kind of my technique a lot based on, at best, an 11-yard snap. Usually there's at least one side that isn't as good as the other as blocking. So most of my punts in the British game at the moment are me one stepping just to get the ball away. And I've posted a few highlights, especially Nottingham Caesars. They're very good at the rush. And it was our first game of the season. And I only had one that was partially blocked. But every time they were literally millimeters away from the ball. They could have blocked about 4 or 5 of my punts that day. But they just got their hand on one. But it's just so neglected here. And it's
all about practice, though, Martin, because basically there are guys that have got the ability to do it in the UK. There's no shadow of a doubt. There's guys that have got the ability to do it in Australia, China, Japan, wherever you want to go. But they've got to practice it every single moment of the day. And the guys that I used to work with would at college, you'd be practicing it down the halls of residence, like in the evening when you're back at home. In the morning before you go to practice, when you're at practice, they're practicing that. Whereas if you're in a British game, the last thing they're bloody thinking about is doing long snapping, because they're worried about hitting someone, they're worried about making the catch, they're worried about the other bits and pieces, because you only get, a very limited time. There's a limited number of footballs that that you've got to actually practice these things, and it's just about practice and repetition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important point that you bring up there about actually dedicating focus to special teams, because, and certainly I think my first experience of Britball was watching East Kilbride Pirates back in 2003, who were a fantastic team, pretty much dominant until they had to play someone like the London O's, as it was back in the day in the finals. But they could run over people pretty much with just the running back. They didn't even have to worry that much about a passing game, never mind special teams. And then, so the game, I guess, has come a long way in those 20 years. But even still, you'll usually have people playing multiple positions, double acting, whether it's the kicker or the punter is also, in some cases, the quarterback, never mind the long snapper, the holder, and how they fit into that piece. One of the things that was really, I guess, positive to see in that note is myself and Dan from the crew, we actually covered the Scotland under-19 game in Edinburgh weekend against Team North, and both teams managed to successfully hit a field goal in the first quarter, just showing that they do have that attention to detail coming through. And yes, later on in the game that they did have some special teams struggles, but they were still, putting attention to that and trying to make the kicks rather than just simply playing 4-down ball and going for 2 every time. And I think that's it. It's like you say, Bobby, it's repetition. If you dedicate yourself to that the same way as you might in the gym or in your conditioning or, any other facet of the game, then it can come good.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is it's a skill that can be learned, right? And if it's taught the right way, then it's a skill that can be learned, snapping the ball and holding it. But they're just, kind of talking about British football. It's, I would love for us to have this big influx of players. It would be such a neat thing for British football to take off like it used to be. It used to be a big thing. And, I've been involved with the Edinburgh Wolves over the last little bit. I actually played last year myself, and which was fun, rolling back the years a little bit, But it's such a great thing. And I look at it, and I honestly, I was speaking to our head coach about this, and it's football here in its purest form, in its rawest form. The players in America, they've been playing since they were 5, 6 years old, Little League all the way through. But here it's guys that have been playing rugby or football or basketball, and they're making this transition across. And, you can't teach an athlete to be an athlete. He's an athlete, but you can teach him skills. And I love it, because it is, as I said, it's football in its purest form. These guys are so raw, and a lot of them just want to learn and learn. And we've got a lot of good coaches here in the UK. You know, we've got a lot of young guys that are trying to learn and teach the game. But man, it would be nice to know, you know, if you're standing back there, Martin, you're standing back at 15 yards where you should be to give yourself some time, that there's a ball coming right to your hip. You know what I mean? You're not having to jump or move. It's coming right to your hip and you can step into it and, you know, you're getting time to put it away. But
Bobby, anyway.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It is different when you're playing professional, whether you're playing college. It is almost like a different. You almost have to readjust. Like it's a different technique, as Martin said.
Yeah.
You can't. You know, you have to do things a little bit differently. You know, you still got the talent. You know, even if you one step, Martin, you've got the talent to do it. But then imagine being able to have the 3-step. You know, a 2-step. A 2-step punt. You know, or having 1.2 seconds to kick the ball after the ball's been put down for you to do a field goal. You know, it's a different kettle of fish. You just don't know what's going on. I was lucky enough. My actual when I was in the UK, I actually had a pretty good long snapper, a guy called Kirk O'Field, who's a really good friend of mine still, and he was a pretty good long snapper. But still, you know, the occasional, you know, you still didn't know where it was going to go necessarily. So I even learned to drop kick. I did some drop kicks when I was at junior level, just because what are you going to do with it? So just I think I did like one successful drop kick. I tried one at college level because I tried one at college level, but I fluffed my lines massively. But yeah, it's lots of practice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it was one of the stories actually that came out from the weekend, and I guess it's one of these ones that if you saw the stat at first, you might be keen just to kind of push it to one side. But with Cole Kmet, the Bears tight end, became the first long snapper to score 2 touchdowns in a game. And wow. I think you'll just kind of look at that and you'll say, well, hang on a second, he's not a long snapper, he's a tight end. But to that point, actually, when you've got to double hat and you've got to do all the offensive schemes and, you know, you score the touchdown, you celebrate, and most of the offensive guys are off the field, especially the skill positions. You know, he's got to come back, and then he's got to do his job in special teams. Actually, yes, you know, the touchdowns are more of a, you know, that's the tight end making the score, but he's still got to be able to come and do his job in special teams after that. It shows the real challenge that he's accomplished there.
I guess just jumping in there, Gav, like I mean that's a question for all three of you. Like obviously, like being in that situation, thinking of Cole Kmet, for him, his heart rate must have been up here because he's just run in there to score that touchdown. Then he's got to get into that headspace of being calm. So where I was going with this was, you know, kickers the same as goalkeepers as well, are always they're only considered as good as their last save or their last kick in the case of kickers. How do you kind of cope with just that pressure of, you know, moving on from a miss, say, kind of thing? Like, how do you go about it?
Rob?
Okay. I always went to, if you practice good during the week, then you'd have a good game. That was kind of my philosophy. And I'd always try and take myself back to, you know, a good kick that I'd done in practice or a good kick that I'd done in a game, and just try and refocus. Do you know what? I'd like to say that I was really good at doing that kind of thing, but I wasn't. You know, in my head, you're still thinking about the previous kick. You know, it's really difficult. But in some instances, you're still thinking about the previous kick. When I did miss a couple of times, I was kind of angry at myself because I know that I can do it. And then you kind of have to refocus and just kind of say, look, I can do this. What are you thinking? So, you know, but there was a couple of times I missed a couple of kicks in a game, both at college and at pro level. And sometimes it gets in your head and it is difficult, but you just have to refocus. Remember, you can do it. The goalposts haven't moved from where they were in practice last week. It's still the same kick. You've still got the same ball. You've still got the same leg, you know. So actually, there's no difference from every kick. It's the same thing every time. And just reminding yourself that and just kind of trying to focus. But, you know, sometimes I felt like I wasn't as good at that as I should have been. but that's just the way that you're human after all, like you say. Just got to do your best to try and cope with it.
Absolutely, that's great insight, Rob. And I guess maybe that's probably a good mark for us to kind of move on. It's been great kind of having that introduction to everyone and their background, how they've came into the game. Now let's move on to, I guess, the topic that binds all five of us in this episode tonight, which is, of course, the Scottish Claymores. And as we record this, this is actually this month actually marks 20 years since the Claymores, it was confirmed that they'd be folding. So for some of our younger listeners, the Scottish Claymores, heresy that might be to say this amongst this group, but the Scottish Claymores are in fact the UK's last professional American football franchise, and that remains the case to this day, despite the international series and all the various London games that we've seen over the last 17 years. But we don't want to reflect on the business side of it. I guess what we want to talk about is not that particular anniversary, but the 10 years of the Claymores, and particularly your time playing with the team and as fans. So, Rob, I'll come to you first on this one. Of course, you had already been in the league for a year with the London Monarchs, or the England Monarchs as they were in '98. In 1999, obviously the Monarchs had folded, and you had the opportunity to come and play as part of the Claymores team. So do you want to tell us about, I guess, that transition?
Yeah, so it finished in '98 with the Monarchs, and I did actually go over and actually tried out for a couple of teams in the Arena League in the States, but it didn't work out. And so I got a proper job. And the first time I met Bobby was in '99. We both played for Great Britain against France. Do you remember, Bob, down in Milton Keynes, I think it was? Yep. And Jim Kreiner was there. And Jim Kreiner invited both me and Bobby to come up to the Claymores. He spoke to us afterwards and said, look, we want you to be our kicker for the Claymores, and we want you to, try out and see what you can do. And I was like, this is great. It's a bit strange being an English guy going up to Glasgow and living in Glasgow. I can tell you, it's kind of it's an interesting proposition, but one that I grabbed it with both hands. And we talk about opportunities. Yeah, you grab it with both hands and you say, yes, please. I want to give it my best. And so I ended up rooming with that dude there to my left. So he was my roommate when we got up to the Claymores.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good question just to come in here, because for the vast majority of the NFL Europe rosters, the teams were made up from primarily NFL teams allocating players to the league for that season. It was very much certainly by '99 and for the remaining years, it was very much viewed as that developmental league. But obviously, the group of us on this call know, but for some of our listeners, that there was a quota on the team for national players, and the expectation was that I think there would be one player on the field every other series that would be a national representative. And then on special teams, I think the national kickers, like yourself, Rob, where I think that you kicked anything under, I think, was it 40 yards you had to kick?
It wasn't that long. Anything under. So national kickers were compelled to kick under 32 yards, but we could compete with the other American kickers there as well. So that's what every year it was a challenge to try and beat out whoever was allocated to the team and try and compete against them the best you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, obviously most of the players are American, and essentially they would have training camp and they would come over just before the season. So with yourself being a part of the national player setup, you mentioned obviously moving to Glasgow. So how much of the year would you actually spend in Scotland?
It depends. So in '99, so you go to training camp. When was it, Bob? February, something like that?
February, yeah.
So you spent 6 weeks.
We always went a little bit early. We had like a national camp that got there before everybody else reported. We were about 10 days or a week or something before everybody else reported.
Yeah, and then we spent 6 weeks out in Florida normally. So we went. Early days it was Orlando, and then we went to Tampa after that, and then so 6 weeks with the we'd go out for 10 days, we'd practice together. There'd be a kicking camp, so the kickers would all get together. So you'd have 30 kickers, that some of the best in the world, that are, just practicing together every day, and then those kickers would get allocated to teams. We'd go to the teams, we'd do practice matches. You'd learn the system, you get to know each other as teammates. And then you'd move back to wherever you were going. So you get a guy allocated to Barcelona, they're sitting on the beach. You get a guy allocated to Scotland, and they're at steps every day. And so we'd be there for what during the season was like 10, 12 weeks. And then after that, the world's your oyster. You get picked up by you. Most of the guys would go back to the NFL and play for their teams. I think one thing, Gav, is that actually you can't say enough about the quality of players that played in NFL Europe. Okay, we're not talking. They say developmental league, and it makes it sound almost, I don't know, third division. But actually, it was made up of young players who were the cream of the next generation. And you watch some of the NFL programs right now. What's the one I'm thinking of? The one where the guy they follow them in training camp.
Hard Knocks.
Hard Knocks. So you watch Hard Knocks, and you watch a guy that's been practicing there, and then he gets cut, and that's it. It's done. That's it. His life's over. But NFL Europe gave those guys something extra, and it was hard for them. A lot of them, were superstars, and it was hard for them to move from their home in Louisiana to come to Amsterdam and spend 10 weeks. But holy moly, what a great experience for them to experience life and to grow as an individual, and all of those things. So it was really an amazing experience to be a part of that growth. People like Dante Hall, people like Lawrence Phillips, those guys having a second opportunity to actually do something that was amazing. People like Kurt Warner, and these guys are superstars. We're not talking second-rate players here. We're talking absolute legends of the game.
And I think what's really interesting there, Rob, is you mentioned, I guess, some of those headline names that many people following the game today will still be familiar with. Obviously, Kurt Warner, big name on NFL Network. But actually, one of the other names that Martin mentioned, which I think is really interesting, is Martin. You'd mentioned, I think, the second year that you're really following the Claymores, the quarterback Scott Dreisbach, I think was named in 2002. Not many people will know that name. However, he went to, I believe, the University of Michigan. Any idea who his backup was when he was at Michigan?
Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite a funny old world, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I think we see it even every year within the draft. The number of players that they come in much heralded, coming in to go to NFL teams, and it doesn't work out for them. But yeah, some of these, we had some big stars that came through NFL Europe, and some of them, they did go on to bigger and better things. Some, a number of them, it didn't work out, but they did come in with a pedigree that the quality was absolutely there. Bobby, I guess from your perspective, do you want to, I guess, give some insights on your experiences being part of that Claymore setup?
Yeah, it was, and I kind of, to touch on what Rob said, like, it was this league, and it's a little bit different now because they have practice squad. They can have multiple players on, because some of these dudes. I've coached in college. I coached collegiately for 10 years, right? And there's some guys that come out of college that are ready to play in the NFL, right? And there's some that are not. And that doesn't mean that they're not good enough to play in the NFL. There is just a gap. Like the NFL, the players in the NFL are the best of the best of the best of the best. And some guys just need a little bit of time. And we've seen it. They came here, right? And thing is, if you go to you're drafted, a lot of guys were drafted. They'd been in the NFL for a year or two, kind of released, picked up by another team, and they hadn't maybe played for a year or two. And they come here and they get full-time football, full-time training, full-time snap. There's something you can train all you want, but unless you're playing the game speed, all these different things, you're not. And there was a plethora of players, and somebody who pops into my mind, and he went on, had a great career, and he's not a Dante Hall but Barry Sims, who was our left tackle, offensive lineman. He went on to have a great career, 12-year, 13-year career as an offensive lineman, made a massive impact for the Raiders and the 49, all these different things. And we could sit and talk about names that did that, and it was because they had the opportunity to come here and play in a very well organized league with great coaches. And I think it showed a lot of character, or a lot back to the teams that were allocated them, that these kids would actually, I say kids, these young men would come over here in a different country, some that didn't speak different languages, different culture, different things, but yet they would find a way to put on a show on a weekend, you know. And for me, like I'll never forget. Like I'm 6 foot. I'm not a little guy, you know. I'm 6'3", 245 pounds. I was 6'3" and a little bit chunkier back then than I am now, right? But I wasn't a little guy, you know. And I remember when we reported to our hotel for our first time coming together as a team, and I walked in there, and I've never felt so small in my life. And it was just this feeling. We had, I don't know if you remember, Rob, a player called Satoni Sargent, right, who was a defensive end that we had. He was massive, right? And I remember standing there, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is legit. Like for me, I was an 18-year-old kid. Like I was just 18, 19 years old. I was young. And it was really quite a cool realization for me. Like, this is cool. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but this is cool. And then
that's me every day, Bobby. That's me every day, looking at normal sized people.
but just I was sitting in that hotel. We all got together and were being introduced, and there was University of Michigan, Nebraska, Ohio State, you know, all these different colleges. And then Mike Kenny introduced me, and there was Rob Hart, Murray State. I was a kid. I'd just left Winchborough, Livingston, you know, and I don't know if you remember, but Mike Kenny introduced me, Robert Grant, University of Hard Knocks. You know, I'm like, what the heck? You know, but for me, it was such a cool experience at the time. Like, and I kept, like, I was this kid from Livingston.
Yeah.
I had no right being there, other than the fact that I did have the right because I'd worked hard and did these things, and somebody gave me a chance. Jim Kreiner gave us a chance, but he gave this kid, a little kid from Livingston, a chance to fulfill a dream. And it was so cool. And kind of we went there, we went to camp, and I kicked well and competed. And, you know, it's funny because our relationship, there's parts of me that, you know, people might think, well, why do you like Rob Hart? Like, he took your job for years, you know, but he didn't. And I never ever felt it that way. You know, I was this young guy learning, and I was good. I had a cannon for a leg, but I was still quite immature in the head, and he would settle me down at times. I remember at training camp, because Rob kicked, and I was a kicker and a punter, you know, and I remember I go in and punt. I don't know if you remember this, Rob, but I have nightmares still about it. We were scrimmage against Rheinfire, and I go out and punt, and I take a snap, perfect snap, and I hit a punt that goes about 70 yards. It's in the air for 5.5 seconds. It was beautiful. Like, there was this hush all around. All the NFL guys are like, holy smokes, line it up again. I'm like, oh, I've got this. Next snap goes through my hands, hits me in the face mask, and that's the end of the scrimmage. You know, talk about trying to get yourself ready for it. But I remember, like, Rob was great for me, because I would be frustrated at things, and Rob I always thought was kind of level-headed and calm, and I'd make my field goal, but I wouldn't hit it clean or whatever, and it was I always, at that point when I was younger, I tried to always be like the student. I wanted to learn, I wanted to grow, and we had great coaches. Jim Kreiner was brilliant, you know. We had a great staff, and we had lots of cool experiences, and just to kind of be shoulder to shoulder with these guys was a really cool experience. And, you know, we've some of us still have great relationships all these years on, and social media has been a great thing where you can keep in touch with people. But just for that, it was such a pivotal point in my life. And I wish, and I say this looking back now, I wish I had maybe done some things a little bit different, you know, taking care of things better in the gym or taking opportunities. But I sometimes I was a little bit unlucky, you know. I had some injuries, you know, that after I got an injury, I hurt my arm, and I got an injury, went to camp and failed a medical and got released. But it was cool. The Claymores kept me on. They brought me back. I would come to the stadium and do things and do chalk talks and be at practice and do all, you know, all these things. But then I had the opportunity, actually, it was a little bit backwards, to go to college afterwards and play at East Carolina, you know. So all these things that I would never have had the opportunity to do if it hadn't been for somebody giving me a chance. And actually, you know, even though I kind of said a minute ago, to feel like what am I doing here? But to actually know that I belonged there, you know. And it was such a cool thing. And I think that first year at the Claymores, Rob, we had a really cool coaching staff, and we had a really cool team, you know, and we had guys that were there that actually embraced being in Scotland, you know, and it really made it a cool thing. We were all together. We would do things together. You know, we would all work. Some days we put our shirts on and go work at TGI Fridays and do things. So you were actually doing things with people that you were building a relationship. And, you know, there was some guys that came across, and I don't think they took advantage of the opportunity for them. And those are the ones that suffered, you know. But for the guys that really embraced what NFL Europe could do for them, it was a great experience. And it's one that I cherish every day, you know, the opportunity that it gave me. And especially going forward, you know, I got a job at BYU. And I was able to put Jim Kreiner. I coached at BYU for 5, almost 6 years, and put Jim Kreiner down as a reference. And our linebacker coach, special teams guy, knew the Kreiner fact, all these different things, you know, and it was such a cool thing. And to feel that things that I had learned from him and learned from other people were put me in good stead to actually go and have an impact on a team. I believe, well, right now they're one of the best in college football, you know, and they were, you know, and to work for Bronco Mendenhall, who I believe is the best head coach, best defensive guy in football. The guy is just a genius, you know, and to learn from him. And it's all those things, you know, the day in, day out, getting to be around these people kind of taught me more about becoming a good person, becoming a man, becoming my future self through the game of football.
Yeah, and I think you know, just to speak to that, because I guess again, you know, this group, you know, we all, you know, we'll probably be able to remember some of these names like it was yesterday. But for, you know, people who are maybe you know, less familiar with the Claymores, that 99 team, I think in terms of their record, didn't do particularly well. They were 4-6, I think. But if you actually remember the players that were in that, we had Damien Craig, who I think set what I think is still a record for passing in a professional football game. It was 611 yards in that game in Frankfurt.
Straight to the Hall of, like, Clinton, Ohio. Straight to it, yeah.
His jersey's there, isn't it? Like the
jersey's there, his cleats are there. But also Donald Sellers had a career game as well. He had something like 450 yards receiving on 12 catches or something ridiculous, you know.
Dwayne Hawthorne, he was on the squad that year, and he had a stellar NFL career. Matt Finkus was on the team. He's a character. There was
Philly with 99 so much, but actually the one name that a lot of Claymores fans will remember is Yo Murphy was back in 99.
Yeah, so he was
the hero of World Bowl 96, but you know, he was a big part of that 99 team. And actually, you know, kind of tying that on to NFL progression, he's played in Super Bowls as well. I think he fielded the opening kickoff.
He was a return guy for Tampa.
Yeah,
and St. Louis as well, the Rams.
Yeah, the Rams too.
Multiple teams. So, you know, that there was, as we've just talked about, you know, there was a lot of talent in that league. And I guess, you know, moving away from that 99 team specifically to yourself, Martin, coming into the NFL Europe as a fan, did there, did it matter to you that, that this wasn't the NFL? What was your kind of take on NFL Europe as a product?
Oh, like I said earlier, it was just nice to have a sport that you've kind of just discovered playing during the off season. So that was kind of a part of it, but also it's like the identity as well. It's like, yeah, we've all got an NFL team, but that's like an adopted team. And it was actually getting behind a team that's on your doorstep, and that really appealed to me. It was like, okay, professional European league.
Yeah,
that's what more could you want? I didn't care if it was third stringers or fourth string. I just loved seeing people represent the Claymores and all the other teams as well. It was just good to the national players all had a story. Werner Hippler, there's loads. They all had a story from their own individual countries as well. So it was kind of like you could really get behind people. And obviously I was a massive fan of Rob, when I first
I'm so sorry, Martin.
I still a big club.
That is there's sort of two very different strands that kind of really hit home for me as a fan of the Claymores. I guess it's different extremes because on one hand you had the presentation, so Fox Sports was heavily invested into the league at the time. So, this is a time, as Rob said, we weren't that far away from only having 4 channels, but, the games were on Sky. You were getting the same, thumping theme tune playing for a Claymores Rhine Fire game as you still get to this day, when it's Cowboys getting humped by the Lions at the weekend. It's the same music, that's still going on right now. But at the same time, it was also accessible. So there was a real big fan culture around this league. And okay, the Claymores, compared to some of the German teams, didn't have the same level of attendance, but the fans, were really dedicated. You would have people that were really keen to meet the players after the games. They would go out and support them at training. They would go and do triple headers, where the schedule allowed and watch all 3 games. I think I was still at uni when that was all happening, so I didn't get to do that. But I think, like you say, it was, people they lapped it up because, yes, you can go and you can watch a game in the States, but even now, to go and watch a game in London, coming down from Scotland, it's an expensive day out, and that's if you can even get a ticket. But as a fan, and for me at that time, still being a teenager, I could spend my pocket money and go to Hampden or go to Murrayfield, and I think that was such a special part that I could make a connection then that 20 plus years later I still can't really do, even though I have taken on the Giants as a team. I guess it's a real big part of certainly my identity as a fan of the sport even now.
And I think, kind of, as you touched on this, and there was something special about our fans and NFL Europe fans. You talked about the accessibility, but I also think the league or the teams did a really nice job of allowing and having the fans and the players kind of be together, because I remember we would be at practice and we had fans never miss a practice, and even though you talked like in Germany that they had 45,000 people, the Scottish Claymores were the 3rd highest attended professional sport in Scotland after Celtic and Rangers, and even though, like, say we had 20,000 or 15, 16,000, whatever, in Hampden, it's a bit, but man, you guys never stopped making noise. The atmosphere was such a cool thing, and it really allowed a connection between the players and the fans and the players, and that you guys were just as important to what we were able to do on the field. And it was such a unique thing. I do have a lot of fond memories of kind of interactions with the fans and the relationships, and I think we've touched on this, that the being able to be so close and have this feeling of belonging to or being a part of, you know, I love the 49ers, you know, but man, they're in California, and you know, I know Fred Warner plays for them, and there's connections and things there. But I'm a fan. I like to watch them on TV, you know. But
Bob, we're talking. I think the front office, just coming into that as well. The front office at the Claymores were awesome. They did a really good job. Steve Livingston was a great general manager, and he understood the remit. You know, he understood that what they wanted to do was spread the sport and create accessibility. That you know, Scott Cooper was a fantastic guy. Did a great job working at schools during the off season, and just making it more accessible and you know, giving people access to it. You know, tickets to children during the, you know, and I think that Scottish American football in Scotland is still benefiting from, you know, 20 years on, what they laid down back, you know, in those days. But that was the front office doing that work, and they were really very good. But it was brilliant, you know, as a player, you know, to have people come up to you and to interact with you, and it was nice both ways. It worked out. We had fan days. Do you remember the fan days we used to have before the season? People used to sponsor us. You know, we used to have banners and stuff, and people would pay to have a shirt at the end of the season.
Yeah,
you didn't have that in soccer, not at that time. You do now, but you never had that for, you know, as far as I was aware, you couldn't do that kind of interaction with any soccer team, whether it's Premier League or Championship. It was the front office did a great job.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Rob. You do make a really, because they worked all year round.
Yeah.
So that we could be able to put something on the field come springtime, and they did a really great job. You know, kind of in the schools and the community. That's a great point.
And I think actually it's a really great thing that you touch on, because you know, Steve Livingston in particular. I don't want to talk too much about the business side of how things ended, but I remember you know, that day in October 2004 where, you know, the news came out, and they made a point of having a fan meeting in the sports cafe, I think it was, in Sucky Hall Street in Glasgow. And it was all kind of announced very much on that day, and it's whoever can make it. Steve Livingston and I think Alistair Kirkwood as well, you know, came up for that day, and they addressed the fans, and you could tell, you know, just I guess the emotion there, you know, particularly from Steve Livingston, you know, to put everything into that franchise to keep things going. And you do realize now, just, you know, even speaking to yourself, how much, you know, it means so much to now. You think about how much it meant to people at the time to think that you know, that franchise, that team that had been part of us for a decade had been taken away. And I don't want to linger on that, but you know, you then think about maybe the legacy and some of the things that actually that the Claymores did that maybe for American fans they would think nothing of it. But if you think about Scottish and British sport now, things that they did at the time seem completely alien. Backfield parties. If you go to Murrayfield now for the rugby, it is a full day event. They will have the early game on a screen. You can sit there, you know, with a beer or soft drink, whatever your preference is. You can watch Ireland against Wales before Scotland takes on England. You can stay around at the stadium after the game. There's a band playing. I mean, even, you know, music after goals, I don't think that was really a thing in football till sort of, you know, 2000 or something like that. But, you know, that was one of the first things that jumped out to me at a Claymores game when I went in '96 was, you know, there was music, there was fireworks even, you know, going off, and just all these things that helped to add to the game day experience. And in many ways, you know, the Claymores as a British sports team were very much ahead of its time. And I think sometimes we can forget some of these details.
Can I just add to that? Yeah.
Of course.
Obviously, the game that I went up in 2002, I remember, like, the internet was quite still in its infancy a little bit. And I remember my dad brought a gold ticket. Because there was gold, silver and bronze.
Yeah.
And we're like, right, okay, we're coming from Oxfordshire up to Scotland. For the sake of £3 more, we'll get a gold ticket. And I remember we we were treated like VIPs, and I remember we got taken into like some nice kind of executive, room. We had a pep talk by Jim Tom Sula. We saw all the cheerleaders. They came out and they did a little bit of a routine and stuff. And then I think there was a finger buffet or something on the go.
Yeah.
It was the game, and it was like, for a 15-year-old, like that ticket was like £12.
And you get all that for it.
You get all that for £12, and it was just a phenomenal experience. And
I was always slumming it in the bronze tickets. I never got a finger buffet, but I always had a good time.
I think I'd worked my way up through the rungs over the years. I kind of went from the bronze and kind of sneaking across as the game got getting better to actually. Yeah, I think by my last couple of seasons, I'd upgraded to the. I was kind of one of the prawn sandwich brigade, sitting in the padded seats in the hospitality. But yeah, I think the team they put on a hell of experience for the fans, and I guess that was. Yeah, it was incredible, and I think for me, it was just something that set us up for life. And it's funny, you talk about the influence of the internet and how social media definitely wasn't a thing, but I think it was only really towards the tail end of the Claymores that I even had like broadband, and like all of a sudden I was able to stream the highlights of a game. I think I got broadband 2003. But just because it was so new and exciting, I would go back and get these streams of like highlights from 2001 and 2002 and play these games back, just because you could. And it almost makes you wonder now, with social media and everyone's got a phone that you can go and you can clip things, and everything's just so accessible. Like how that experience might have been different today. Even in terms of the front office and the tools that they could have had at their disposal to promote the sport, what that could have meant for them. Obviously, we're now seeing the NFL Europe kind of became NFL Europa after the Claymores folded and went on for 3 more seasons. But I think actually that same year that the entire European project folded, that was also the year that we moved into the international series. I think it was Giants Dolphins, and I guess that's grown and gone from strength to strength over the years. We've gone from 1 game to 2, 3, 4. Now we've got games in Germany, in Spain, Brazil. I think Goodell is now talking about having ideally 16 games a year. Every team essentially going to this. I think it's Neil Reynolds from Sky Sports calls it almost like the Formula One model, and there being a bit of a tour. So in some ways, it feels like you can definitely see the direction of travel in terms of where the NFL wants to go. But maybe instead of lingering in that, what I maybe want to ask you guys about is we've seen actually the legacy of NFL Europe continuing in the EFL. The European Football League. So a number of the former German franchises and, in fact, the Barcelona Dragons, those brands have come back in a slightly different guise. Do you think that that's something that we could potentially see expanding into the UK? Or do you think that maybe the NFL's priorities in terms of the big league will maybe put a kibosh on that?
But just personally, I don't know, because the amount of money that it would cost to run an organization at that level in the UK, I don't know if it's going to happen. But like the NFL, like Rob and I last year went down to a game in London, and I think the NFL they've found a really cool model to bring their product to different parts of the world, and people. They sell out the stadiums, and people and I think it's a pretty cool model. I think it might be hard on the players and the staff and the organizations because they've literally got to take all their stuff and move it halfway around the world. But I don't know. But it was fun actually. Just a few weeks ago to watch highlights and watch Jim Tom Sula win the EFL with the Rheinfire. You know, and I love that for him. He's such a cool guy. He's such a cool dude, and to see him do that, you know, and I was a little bit excited when I heard that, you know, the rights to the NFL Europe teams' names had been bought or been taken over by them. I just don't think that's going to maybe happen in the UK. I hope I'm wrong, but you would need to have somebody that's willing to put a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort in to make that happen. You know, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at that final, the EFL final, there was 45,000 people at that game.
I think it was about that.
That's phenomenal. It was always that way in Germany. That they'd love the game. There was a lot of US influence, you know, with the military bases and the things out there, but the Germans love it. You know, we had a lot of guys when we played that went to the GFL, and the GFL is a big thing there. But it would be nice. I would maybe just for, you know, reminiscing for the Scottish Claymores to come back to the UK. It would be cool.
Or the London Monarchs.
Or the Scottish Claymores.
Why not?
I was going to ask Martin actually, because Martin knows more about the setup at grass levels than I do for sure, and you do as well, Bobby. But just Martin, do you think that there'd be much interest to go and watch these games?
I think a lot of it would depend on what city would ultimately have the team.
So let's say London, because let's say London, that's probably where it'd go, or maybe even, you know, Birmingham, I guess.
If London had a team, I do know from speaking to a lot of people, especially like who I play with and things like that, not a lot of people know about the European League of Football. Because we're not in it at the moment. The interest is quite low. I've followed it since it was announced and when it come back, and it has grown quite nicely each year. There's been a few franchises that have like come in and gone after 1 year and stuff. My only concern is I think that because we've had these international series games so long, maybe it might be the perception of, well, why would I want to go from watching Premier League in October to the conference in, you know, June? As an outsider's view on what the league is kind of like and what it's trying to achieve.
And that did happen. There was a lot of that kind of talk when the Claymores were playing. It was like, you know, I'd rather watch it on TV than go and see, you know, second-rate players. And there was a lot of that. I think it would need, I think Martin just touched on that, it would need a lot of marketing and a lot of input to be able to make it successful. But I think the level, I think there's a fan base now compared to when the Claymores were around. I think that the fan base is there. I think that when I started playing in the 80s, it had a great fan base. Football had a great fan base in this country. Then when I started playing, it dropped off. I don't know whether there's a coincidence, but that's what happened. And then in 2004, they bring back the international series, and the international series takes off, and that, you know, the fan base is there. So if you can get people interested, I think that'll make a massive difference.
I think if you had a British team and you had, for example, someone like Lewis Rees-Zammit as a starting running back, you know, or, you know, a second string running back who's going to get the reps, I think it's all the profile who would really be a talking point to get people to think, oh, what's this EFL? What's this? You know, I think about a marquee player, it would probably die a death very quickly. My personal.
One thing I was going to ask on that, Martin, it kind of touches back on something you, Bobby, said earlier on, and relates into something I'm a big fan of here in Canada. Like, I love ice hockey. Big goaltender fan. I seem to like my pressure positions type thing, kickers and goalies and all that in all sports. But one thing I think the NHL does really well compared to the NFL is they do have that. They have the AHL, and so every team in the league in the NHL has a franchise that they work closely with and that next level down in hockey, and that's for those players we talked about going back to the NFL Europe earlier. The guys who are considered tweeners, like they're too good for, they were amazing in college, but they're too good for, say, like a lower level of football, but they're not quite there for the NHL kind of thing in hockey, using that as an example. I do wonder, I know we have the practice squads and stuff in the NFL, but I do wonder if there is a way that the NFL might be interested in possibly kind of resurrecting more involvement in the EFL, and then maybe having teams partner up with some cities over here, and then using that as okay, if we have a guy who's maybe like Louis Rees-Zammit, even using him as an example, like he almost made the Chiefs, and then he had his shots, but he obviously wasn't quite there yet. But you maybe send him over to do a few years in NFL Europe, and then he's a guy you can call up when you have injuries if he's playing well enough. That's what you do with the AHL, is that you have those guys that are not quite there, but almost.
But going along with that, there's a couple of leagues that have started in the US, the USFL and things like that. The Rock team, so like the USFL and the NFL, there's some sort of relationship going on there, which, because you do, like, I know we didn't want to kind of talk a lot about the business side of this, but the NFL is a business.
Yeah.
And NFL Europe survived by each NFL team putting money into a pot to support NFL Europe. And
developing players. They develop the whole plan was develop players and develop the NFL franchise. And I think that the problem with the EFL's got is that it's not NFL, and the NFL have got their own way of doing things at the moment. And their way of doing things is developing it through games in throughout the country. They've got the NFL Academy, which is hopefully bringing players to college level in the States. The brand of the NFL is difficult to break or difficult to get into. It would have to be almost like another NFL Europe.
Yeah, that's like, you would need to have it NFL led, I think so. And it's happened with the NHL was they pushed to have those partnerships. So like, you're in that situation where you can send guys down and you can call them back up when you have injuries. So it'd be that.
I think it's the role of the league kind of changed over time, because I think initially when the NFL tried to come into Europe, initially it was just purely to try and make money out of the teams, and then it was that pivot towards making, well, no, actually this is a developmental league, before they realised that actually, well, one, we're still losing a lot of money, but two, we need to have it's better to have our players in camp year round and additional workouts. But the one thing that maybe jumped out to me, and it's when we're speaking to Phoebe Schechter, was I guess there's all these different facets that help to grow not just the NFL brand, but the sport as a whole. So we've seen, of course, we've already touched on the internet and the role that social media now plays. Fantasy football, again, has been another one that's helped just make the sport as a whole that bit more accessible. But actually, there is a thought maybe comes into my mind is having any form of prolific football going to help expand the brand? I've maybe touched on before, one of my passions and Dan's is around flag football, and we actually saw a number of the players from the recent World Championships. They were on the screen at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium at the weekend. There was the NBC documentary that was broadcast on Sky Sports. So if you haven't heard about the likes of Venita Crouch and Diana Flores, with the Olympics coming up in 4 years, you are going to hear about these, about these women and these men who are very much involved in the sport. Daryl Doucette, the Team USA flag quarterback, he is quite up for a competition with Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson to get his spot competing for the gold, if that's what it comes to. But it almost makes me think that actually presentation is everything. If you put flag football on a pedestal, if you put the EFL on a pedestal, people will want to see that. And that's, I guess, one of the advantages that we have now, where it's very easy for someone to go and put together a highlight reel on an Instagram or a TikTok, whereas before you need to kind of go and drop leaflets or actually try and buy TV marketing. It is there. So I don't know if we'll solve this tonight, certainly, but it's an interesting one to watch in terms of how it develops.
There's no kicking in flag football, so I mean,
So I'm speaking to the wrong crowd here.
I know what are you talking about, but I do love what the NFL are doing with flag. They're making that it's not football per se, but they're making this game more accessible to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
you know, and that's that the NFL. I mean, there's a lot of smart people work there, you know, and I love the flag is becoming. I mean, it's going to be in the Olympics. You know, it's going to be in the Olympics in LA in 4 years' time. It's incredible, but they've really done a nice job with that NFL flag. You know, every team is associated with an NFL or a flag organization. You know, there's so many different things that are happening for them to have exposure to the game globally, worldwide.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great point, Robert. And I guess as we kind of move on towards the end here, we've talked a lot about, I guess, the direction of the sport and where it's heading. But, you know, having gone through, you know, each of your own experiences and journeys, it'd be great just to kind of talk about, you know, where we are now and what's next for each of you. So, Martin, I want to come to you first, because as I say, I think your documentary was very much the inspiration for us trying to get this group together in the first place. So again, I'm going to call it out for people who aren't watching the stream. The British Punter on YouTube, on Instagram. Just tell us a lot about your projects and what you've got coming up next.
I upload at the moment. It's about 2 videos a week. It initially was me in a field punting, occasional game highlights, and that was kind of it. But now I've kind of developed my content. It was very NFL Europe heavy at first, so I've kind of reached out a bit more into NFL content too, but I carry on with the NFL Europe stuff. I think it's a bit of a gap in the market, if I'm being honest. No one's really doing any kind of short videos or any features on NFL Europe. So I just try and make content really selfishly that I find quite interesting. And then if other people do, great. And there's so many stories out there that I think need to be told or need to be mentioned, and if it's a 2-minute video I can do in a couple of hours, then that's worth it to me. I will be looking at doing hopefully a feature on Scott Cooper soon. I want to broaden my range from just kickers and punters to some receivers and national players, that kind of thing. And without sounding cheesy, I kind of, in my own way, I want to inspire the next generation coming through who are not going to know about, you know, Rob, or, you know, it's way before their time. Like my lad's 16. That generation now, if they can see, oh, there was a British guy that played in the NFL a couple of years ago, kicked without a shoe on, you know, that it's things like that I'm hoping my content will eventually find a bit of an audience for and inspire people to go, well, if he did it back then, why can't I do it? He played rugby and football. I play rugby football. Why can't I do it? You know.
Absolutely. No, I think that's superb. And yeah, again, just to reiterate, you know, the handle, I think, for Instagram, for YouTube, The British Punter is where everyone wants to go to get access to those clips. And I think you're absolutely right. It's about inspiring, you know, it is inspiring about the next generation, and just thinking that there's so many different routes into this game that people have. You know, Bobby, you talked about, you know, the 49ers in the 80s, but, you know, for myself, Stu, and in fact yourself, Martin, it was the Claymores, it was NFL Europe in the 90s and the early 2000s. And for people now, it might be different, but that's the great thing, is there is that whole trail of different stories and experiences. And actually, you do get a lot of fans, and more I kind of get into the sport, even now, you realize that the NFL is the top of the pyramid, but it's not everything. People love the stories of, you know, college football and people pursuing that dream. they love the CFL because again that's where they've ended up, and NFL Europe was a big part of that. Rob Hart, I'll maybe come to you next. I can't believe actually we've gotten to a 90-minute podcast without talking about your barefoot exploits, but that's another reason to go out and check out Martin's documentary. But now that you've got both shoes on again, how's life treating you?
Oh, look, just first of all, I want to say thanks to Martin as well. I haven't said in person, but you did a fantastic job on that documentary. And if anybody gets to see any of the other stuff that he's done, it's really good and, very interesting. So thanks for doing that, Martin. For me, I've got 4 children. I've got a foster child. I met my wife when I was with the Dolphins, and we're now in Wiltshire. So we're fostering. We foster babies, so that's kind of full on. And having 4 girls, I'll tell you what, that's full on as well. So I've got my own cheerleading outfit now. I'm not for my outfit, an outfit as in a group of people.
Get the pictures up.
Just to let you know. I am, Bobby and I have been working alongside a guy called Dean Faithful, which is in game day kicking. Dean's playing in Edmonton, so Stu knows him well. And he's kicking over there. Again, he's probably followed a very similar path to me and Bobby, and ended up, he played college football and then went and played pro, but just by working hard and taking opportunities. So very similar, but we're working on something to try and create a pathway for potential kickers to maybe get college scholarships. It happens in, we've got a lot of connections, we know quite a lot of people, and it seems a waste to not give people an opportunity to sit down in front of people and, have an opportunity to go to college. It's a much smaller world now than it was when, in the 90s, we were sending letters out to people and stuff like that. So we're working with game day kicking a little bit. Dean's over in the States in Canada, Edmonton, doing a great job at the Elks. And so he's concentrating on his job at the moment and trying to win a job and trying to win games. But I think when he comes back, we'll be picking up on that and game day kicking. As I said, just to try and create a pathway for giving people an opportunity to do what I did. I was lucky in it. What I did changed my life. So that's what we're trying to focus on.
That's awesome to hear. And I think, both whether it's, in the world of football with game day kicking, or, in the family arena with fostering, I think those are both fantastic initiatives to be involved in. I will say, usually Special Cru, we like to play a little bit coy in terms of who our upcoming guests are. But for those of you who are just listening in Spotify or Apple, there's a few smiles and nods going on when we hear the name Dean Faithful. So just keep your eyes peeled for that going forward. And Bobby, I think finally coming to yourself, obviously, as the surprise guest, even from myself and Stu, just tell us about where you're at right now. I believe you're headed out to the States in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I fly back out next Monday. But I'd just like to echo, and Martin, you did a great job on that. You did a really nice job on Rob's documentary. And it did. I watched it and I watched it and I watched it. And it brought back a lot of fun memories for me, and it was cool. And I remember a lot of those experiences. But kind of just echoing with what Rob talked about, Rob and I had a really, really cool opportunity to go to college in America and experience those things. And I do think there's a lot of talented young people here in the UK that maybe don't know that there's an opportunity for them to do that. Rob said that the world has shrunk. I mean, you can put together a little highlight video and somebody watches it, it goes viral, or you send it. It wasn't that way, but to have a pathway, or to know that there's an opportunity for kids to do that. And I love, Martin, what you talked about inspiring. I believe that's why we're here. And we go through the things in our life so that we can pass on those things to other people, and Rob kind of paved the way for different things. And there's a lot of cool stories, and there's been a lot of cool things that happen that if those stories are not shared, it's really a waste, So I'm excited. I'm going to subscribe to your channel, actually. I'm fired up about it. But yeah, so I spend a lot of time in America. I've got the last few years have been interesting for me with different things. You know, I was in America for 15 or 16 straight years, and during COVID, some stuff went on with my immigration, which has been a bit of a pain. So just trying to deal with that, you know. But I go back to America, and I enjoy it. I'm excited to go back. I coach with a high school team in a town in Utah, and the playoffs start next week. So I'll get to the first playoff game, and looking forward to that. But you know, I keep my hand in coaching. I got involved in coaching. I was a little bit unfortunate with some injuries in my career. You know, it kind of caused me to retire a little bit earlier than I had hoped. But I wasn't very good. I was probably a better coach anyway. So those experiences have kind of helped me, and I like to keep my hand in that, and you know what I'm doing now, and I've really enjoyed it. It's given me a really cool platform to do the things I love, which is to be around people and help people, and I just, you know, I look for opportunities where I can try and just pass on things that I've learned, you know, and the experiences I've had, and I'm grateful for that, and live life and have fun. You know, we look back, and you know, we're all getting a little bit older and wiser, and I would, you know, you talked about it a few times, Gav, as those experiences that you had 20 years ago are still very prominent in your life, and Stu as well, you know, and those are things, those are the things that make us who we are, and I do think that we should pass those things on and try and have an impact on other people and other things in our life.
That's superb, Bobby. I don't think you could say it any better. You know, I think it's been, you know, really inspiring to hear not just your story, but that of Rob's, and obviously the role that Martin is now playing in helping to inspire others in football. It'd be remiss of me not to give a shout out to the Salem Hills Skyhawks into the playoffs over in Utah shortly. So best of luck to them. And I think also just one of the things I wanted to give a shout out to was Head Up, which is the charity that you've been doing a bit of work with recently, and it helped to kind of bring you into the fold for tonight's session. So Rob had obviously mentioned that you've been cycling the length of the country in all the name of a great cause.
Yeah, that's right. And it's funny, Rob and I joke about this often. Like over the last, Rob and I never lost touch. We just never spoke for almost 20 years. It's so weird, right? It's, I don't know, you'd get a message randomly out of the blue, but he's been one of my best friends and mentors for all this time. And so one of my friends, he started a charity, and him and I, we got together and I spoke, and it would, you know, the easy thing would be to try and donate a little bit of money or something, but I wanted to do something different. And he inspired me. He actually took a challenge on himself, and he ran the entire coastline of the United Kingdom, you know.
That's bonkers.
And, it's mental. 5,500 miles in 7 months or something. It was crazy. But I thought I would do something. And previously, several years ago, I did a cycle. I cycled from John O'Groats to Land's End and back. And then the following summer, I cycled across America. And I thought, man, I'll do it. Like, I've not rode a bike for a while. I'll go get a bike and cycle. And that was...
Let me put this in perspective. Bobby just literally picked up a bike. I'm not joking. And when was it? What was the date?
It was like March the 5th or something like that.
Okay, so as Hurricane Daniel came through Scotland, he was on his bike from the north of Scotland coming down. So there was, you know, you explain, Bobby, but you did it on a whim. Like you practiced, you did it on a whim just to help this guy out.
Well, and it was, so I wanted to get started, and I only had to start on a particular day if I wanted to meet up with my buddy that was running. And because he had started, and if I had like 3 days. So I bought a bike on Facebook Marketplace, right? Took it to a bike shop to get it serviced or whatever. It was too small for me, but I rode it anyway. And I left about 3 days later so I could meet him when he was in Carlisle, because he was cutting across and going around. And it was just a few days. I decided to do it, and it was cool. And it took me 10 days, and it rained like 8.5 of those days, torrential downpour. And
well, I need to ask, did you at least buy extremely, because I like cycling, I do a lot of cycling here, road cycling. Did you at least buy good cycling shorts?
I did have good cycling gear. Yeah, I bought padded shorts.
I'm just
had
thinking,
all the gear and no idea.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of padding.
Okay,
I do have a lot of padding.
The issues down below was all.
Vaseline is your best friend. You know? but it was cool. So I put it out there. I told that I was doing it and I wanted to raise money for charity. And Rob sent me a message like, "Hey, where are you going to be?" And Rob drove out and met me and cycled a little bit with me. And it was such a highlight. It was so fun. I was standing where I was meeting him. I was standing at the corner on the road like a little kid. He drove around the corner in his van. I was so excited. It was awesome. And it was like we had never.
Sunny, the nice weather. It was.
I know, it was beautiful. It was perfect, and it was such a really cool thing. And that's as I touched on earlier, like the relationships that we developed when we played for an NFL Europe. They are things like I know there's guys in America that I could call them up and they'd let you stay. They'd put you up. In fact, a really kind of cool experience. I hope you don't mind if I share this. Just kind of. Within that, so several years ago, I cycled across America, and I was riding my bike, and I was coming through Arizona, and it was so hot. I was coming through Arizona. It was so hot, like 115 degrees, and my gosh, like the tires were literally melting on the tar.
Mm-hmm.
So I found this little bike shop, and I went into this bike shop, and he's like, "So, you know, where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to California." He went, "Where'd you come from?" North Carolina. Like, what? And he's like, "You're a little bit big to be a bike rider." I said, "Yeah, I am, but I love it. I love to road bike. I do it often, you know." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You look like a football player." I said, "Well, I did play football, in fact." And he goes, "Where did you play?" I said, "Well, I played at East Carolina. I played a few different places. Played in NFL Europe." Oh, NFL Europe. My neighbor, he coached over it. Do you know Gene Dahlquist? Right? And I'm like, yeah. So he called Gene Dahlquist. Gene Dahlquist drove around to the bike shop, picked me up. We went and got his wife. While the guy was fixing my bike, Gene took me out for dinner and we hung out for a little while. Then I got on my way. And it's such a cool thing. Like in the middle of Arizona, my bike melts because of the heat. And there's one of my former head coaches there to take me to dinner. And that sums up kind of what NFL Europe was for me, for Rob, and for so many people. It gave us a family that will be there forever, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I guess just for, you know, there's lots of smiles and nods in this in the group here, but for those who are kind of, you know, raising eyebrows there, Gene Dahlquist, Scottish Claymores head coach, 2001 to 2003. And again, just another big part of that experience for everyone that's involved with the team. And yeah, I think like you just said, it's just, there's all these memories that come back. I think there's so many different things that, you know, we could have talked about in this call, you know, whether it's, you know, Rob's barefoot kicking or Bobby, you know, obviously your college career in coaching, or Martin, even your exploits in Britball. There's so much more we could do, but I think I'm just so grateful for all three of you coming together tonight to have this conversation, because, you know, just the smiles and the reactions and the emotions it evokes talking about this. I think it shows that even 20 years on, you know, there's still a lot of love for that great thing that brought us together, which is the Scottish Claymores. And you know, it feels like quite a negative anniversary, reflecting on the fact that the team folded 20 years ago this month. But actually, next year, we can actually reflect on slightly more positively. You know, it's 30 years since the Claymores began, and thinking of all the great people that have come from that, whether that's coaches, players, fans, you know, the members of the front office, the cheerleaders, everyone who was a part of that setup and really, you know, created a foundational part of so many fans and even, you know, young players' experience today. I think, you know, this is our first time as a group really talking about the Claymores, but I'm pretty confident it won't be our last over the coming months. So I just want to say thank you to each of you for coming together tonight. As I said, we've been the Grid Irn-Cru. This is Special Cru episode 4. Episode 5 is already in the works, so we do have a number of these specials already coming up. We've got more shows scheduled into November and December, so please keep your lookout on our social media. You can follow us on X, on Instagram, on YouTube, wherever you get your social media. Our podcast available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So however you like to get your podcast, you can get access to the Grid Irn-Cru. For those of you who are on the stream, the branding is very hard to miss. For those of you who are listening on, though, it is Grid Irn-Cru, GRIDIRNCRU. You can follow us however you like that. It's been an absolute pleasure to have each of you on this evening. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much. So
Cheers,
great.
Gav.
Thanks all.